Show the night night Groot. It's time for bed. Time to rest your sleepy head. I am Groot. The day was long and filled with fun. Think of all the things you've done. We've got Rocket saying, "Wait, Groot, don't go to sleep yet. Come on, buddy." Well, we've got the Avengers in the background playing poker.
Hello Internet, I'm Richie and welcome to Sounds of Stadia SideQuest, the show where we take a step off the critical path and explore more of what the gaming world has to offer. On this week's show, I'm joined by the Monster Boy himself and the host of Sounds of Stadia podcast, Mr. Chris.
I've got my adventures pack and I'm ready to go.
And of course, the techie teacher himself, Mr. Tom.
It's me, your Mr. Tom.
Well, I suppose it's kind of fitting that, because today we are going to be talking about Switch and comparing it to Stadia, especially in the more mobile space. But first, we've got some housekeeping. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. This show is all on podcast services as well. It's on all the podcast services I can find. So if you prefer to listen to that way, go for it. We do offer a Patreon membership where you can get this show a whole 5 days early. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and check out the Sound Stadia podcast. Comes out live every Monday. Well, let's just get straight into it, gentlemen. So we're talking about comparing the mobile gaming offering between Stadia and Switch, because I don't think that's something we have in any real depth.
No. In terms of the podcast, we've theorized about it a good couple of times that Switch and Stadia, of all the gaming platforms, are probably the nearest. In terms of like their offerings and their portability factor. Because let's face it, you're not going to be lugging a PS5 or a Series X around anytime soon without.
If you're a hardcore gamer, you would.
Significant travel case. Yeah. So they do line up in terms of that. I mean, Tom, you've got a Razer Kishi, which essentially turns your phone into a Nintendo Switch, a glorification of that. And or a Nintendo Switch. And with the rumours, I think, this past week of a Switch Pro being on the horizon, the rumour is they've got a deal with Samsung to do a 720p quality screen, but with up-res docking ability, so maybe the dock that changes more. And obviously with things like Breath of the Wild 2 on the horizon, is the original Switch, that's just past its 4th anniversary, going to be able to keep up with the requirements of that game going forward. And for me, I've always said Stadia would be a fantastic complement to the Switch. But I guess what we're here today to talk about is in 2021, if you kind of took Nintendo's exclusive games out of it and just stacked the propositions up side by side from both the financial, the games, and the portability factor, how do they actually compare once you take that kind of Nintendo bias out of the argument?
I don't think you can fully, but before we go further, talking about the Switch Pro, my expectation from what I've read up is it's going to be a larger screen and still 720p, but the dock doesn't actually do any of the processing of the Switch. It's all done on device.
Yeah. And
the dock is literally just a HDMI cable, effectively.
I thought the dock did something. I thought that was
it's basically a USB-C to HDMI cable with a USB switching attached. But what my expectation is, I think you're going to see a better processor, a better GPU in there. I think they're going to keep it capped at 720, probably for battery life, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a problem, of course.
And space in a way, because you've got to think about the device being the size that it is and as compact as it is. There's only so much you can actually cram in there with current technology.
The rumours is the screen is going to be larger, which I'm still thinking the main body of the Switch itself will be larger.
Yeah.
But that's going to be an interesting proposition, how it compares to like the Joy-Cons. They fit quite...
I do love the way that the Joy-Cons slip in and out off the side of it.
But I also like how the Razer Kishi feels in hand as well when playing Google Stadia. So I do quite like, I think, with the Switch, the Joy-Cons do feel good, do being able to like lock them in and remove them depending on how you want to do it. I like the number of options you get with the Switch. First of all, for different controller setups, like whether you have the two Joy-Cons connected to the gamepad accessory, so you can actually take it away, or whether you just take it, 1-to-1 and just go for party time like the original adverts and stuff. I think there's a lot of functionality with the Switch. I definitely think a lot of thought, a lot of research, like R&D, was put into deciding how to go with the controller scheme, how to set it up, and so on. And Nintendo, being what Nintendo are, they're always very innovative with doing stuff like that as well. They're always at the forefront of it. And I think the Switch as a console, while it may not see the power, Nintendo never has really seen the power at the forefront of gaming since, the more recent generations. But it definitely hits a bigger market.
Nintendo's focus hasn't been on power since really like the N64 era, where but then they kind of needed power to kind of push between 2D to 3D graphics. I think since they hit a point where the quality of the games look good anyway, and they're not really ever been that focused on the third party offerings, although they do seem to be doing better with the Switch compared to previous consoles. But it's quite an interesting. So Stadia definitely has it beat on power. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. So then it boils down to like, well, why do people like Nintendo over Stadia if it's not about the graphics necessarily? There's something to be said.
I know we're trying to stay away from the talking about Nintendo's exclusives, but I find it hard to talk about Nintendo without, because they have such a big catalogue of exclusives. And it's not just a big catalogue of exclusives, it's a big catalogue of beloved exclusives.
Yeah, of course. You can't deny that. You're buying a Nintendo Switch for one sort of Nintendo property for the most part, whether that be Pokemon, Zelda, Mario, or all the little second-party deals in between. That undoubtedly is the reason. That's the reason I got my Switch was for Pokemon. So what that looks like, again, if you compare to Stadia, we know they don't have the exclusives like anywhere near. They don't have 3 decades worth of history and nostalgia to build upon. Because let's face it, no matter what Pokemon put out, it's going to sell millions just because it's Pokemon. Regardless of how they iterate or how they go Gigantamax and make it look stupidly ridiculous, it's still going to sell because it's of the brand and the IP, where Stadia doesn't have that luxury. So what's it going to bring to the table? That's different. And portability with the Razer Kishi, I think it ticks that box. It's not as form-fitting as the Switch might be, but it's also £200 less.
Yes.
And like you said, Richie, there, back to the games, have we got a list? Did you get a list of games?
Yes. So I'll do a quick run up through of. I picked some. It's not the list isn't fully in a complete comprehensive list, but I've got a list of notable titles for both Stadia and Switch. So starting with Stadia, we've got that we know are coming to in 2021 or suspect to. So with Stadia first, we've got Ark Survival Evolved, Chorus, Chris Tales, Far Cry 6, FIFA 21, Mafia 1, 2, and 3 remasters, Outriders, PGA Tour 2K21, and Riders Republic. For
Stadia.
Yeah, for Switch, we've got Bayonetta 3, Metroid Prime 4, Breath of the Wild is still expected to be this year, Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, new Pokemon Snap, Monster Hunter Rise, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and Skyward Sword HD. But we also know we're getting Pokemon Legends Arceus, Splatoon 3, and Project Triangle Strategy in 2022.
Right. So how many of those are, if most of them are just going to be Nintendo first party, right? For all the Pokemon titles, there's only, from my take on that, it's Monster Hunter Rise. That is exclusive to Switch, though. It's been made specifically for Switch, it's not coming out on PlayStation or Xbox.
I believe so, but if I'm wrong, let us know in the comments.
Yeah. So aside from that, you've got Lego Star Wars and Bayonetta 3 is probably the only one that's not.
I think Bayonetta is now Nintendo exclusive.
Possibly. But then if you compare that to the list, then, so again, my biggest thing with the Switch, I look at the Switch as a supplemental platform, just the same way as at the moment I look at Stadia. I'm always going to buy a PlayStation. I'm always going to have a PlayStation for their exclusive games. If you're out there and you just don't have the cash or you can't find a current console, because we know the Switches have been difficult to get hold of as well throughout their timeline. It kind of just depends on what type of game you are, but the reality is if you want to play Far Cry 6, if you want to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if you want to play Cyberpunk 2077 on the move, you can only do that on Stadia, right?
Yes.
Switch definitely won't be able to do it.
I mean, I'm currently loading up Cyberpunk.
I've done that game. I'm
Actually,
loading up Bravely Default 2.
That's fair enough. But like,
and it's working, and it runs, and it looks great.
Yeah.
But again, for all the shit Stadia gets, is you can't play those powerhouse games on the Switch because it's just nowhere near. It doesn't have the engine inside it to do that, and it never will. We've seen The Witcher 3 did get, but the thing is, because of the platform, and it's got the user base now of 40 plus million, it by default, Bravely Default, if you will, Richie, gets the games. It's got The Witcher 3 running on it. It's getting the Lego titles. It's got let's comparison apples to oranges as well. It's got FIFA, albeit it's a shitty reiteration of the 3-year-old game that launched on the Switch. It's just the roster's updated, which is embarrassing.
Yeah, that's bad. I think,
but just in the state of things in 2021, I think you take out the price of a Switch, so that's like £200+ gone. You've saved that money. You get to play Cyberpunk, Valhalla, Far Cry, but AAA title games that all of your friends are playing anywhere you want.
But one thing we have to remember is, you say it's like £200 for the Switch. If you want to play on your phone, you're probably not wanting to play with the touchscreen controls. You're probably going to want to invest in a controller. So, say a controller and an amount comes to about 50 quid. You're already dropping that price difference down. And personally, I hate the claw style controller grips. I think they're just universally terrible in design. I think there's some major design flaws because they tend to grip where the power buttons or the volume buttons are on your phone, which is just terrible design work in my opinion. And I always find them unbalanced as well. So the answer to that is the Razer Kishi, which Tom has, which is effectively designed by how can we turn your phone into a Switch. But I stand that controller is massively overpriced.
It is.
Either you two looked at the Backbone.
So the Backbone is an interesting one because it's actually supposed to be a really good additional option in terms of what we're looking for there. There's also the Game Sir as well, I think, which a lot of people talk about, which is a strange name, obviously.
I think that's
it's a play on Game Boy, I imagine.
But Game Sir, they actually do like budget mechanical keyboards and stuff.
Right.
They're known a bit in the PC space, but they're not like a Corsair or a Razer like level of acknowledgement.
There's obviously a lot of different organizations out there now who are trying to capitalize on this sort of controller fit for mobile gaming now, because we know the mobile gaming marketplace is an ever growing market. I know I keep using the term again and again. Sorry, guys, but it's clearly something that people are wanting to be able to have that ability to use the normal style gamepad, but for a mobile device as well. Because using touchscreen controls, I'm going to be completely honest with you, it doesn't work for most games. It's shit. It really is not functional.
It works really well on games that are designed for touchscreen controls. But emulated gamepads just don't work for me.
No,
I could get away with it with something like Football Manager, which is fine. To be honest, I could probably get away with playing like Bravely Default 2 with touchscreen controls, because you don't need that. It's turn-based. You don't need that fast twitch input or anything.
But again, price-wise, you're looking for the Backbone at $99 at the moment. So again, you're still looking at that expensive price point. There is nothing reliable.
I suspect we'll see these things come down in price, because I've said it on other shows where I think things like the Kishi and the Backbone are currently priced at the enthusiast level. So because they're not expecting to sell much, you're basically paying for the development costs.
The difference,
So you're overpaying to keep that product viable. As more and more people adopt them styles of controllers, the price will come down.
Yeah, we should point out as well that if you do want to play the Stadia one, you can use your existing controllers. So if you do have a PS4 DualShock that's been kicking around for 5-6 years, you can hook that up via Bluetooth and play Stadia on a mobile device, or on a PC. So again, the barrier to entry is definitely the lowest on Stadia.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's weird because in another world, if Switch on Nintendo had launched with a cloud gaming service that allowed you to play Cyberpunk and Far Cry and such, we'd probably be sat here having a completely different conversation. But because it comes with the new business, the new property, the new platform, the Google graveyard kind of shadow looming over it, I don't think people see them in the same light. But in an ideal world, since the announcement when they said they're going to be shipping Stadia out to businesses to see what they want, how they want to utilize it, I would love to see a future. I've said it a few times in the podcast where Nintendo admit that they've got a shit internal internet infrastructure. They don't know what they're really doing with it. Their online offering is subpar compared to the rest of the competition, but they get a pass because of the Nintendo.
I think it's not just to get a pass.
Team up.
I don't think they get a pass just because of Nintendo. I think they get a bit more of a pass of where they've positioned themselves in the market. As you said earlier, Chris, I'm sure Nintendo don't fully see themselves as that, but both me and you see our Switches as supplementary gaming consoles rather than primary ones.
Yeah.
And that's why I think they get a massive pass, because I think there's a huge majority of people, apart from those who die-hard Nintendo fanboys, that's what they game. Most people who own Switches probably own them for one or two games or franchises. I bought mine. This is a Zelda machine mainly for me.
Zelda machine.
Yeah.
It's amazing how people can buy into the Nintendo infrastructure based on one game alone or one IP alone. Whereas like a lot of other gamers on different platforms are invested in the platform. With Nintendo, it's very much about, like you said before, it's about one specific IP.
Yeah.
It's amazing how Nintendo have managed to keep that sort of...
It's their track record, because the Zelda game is almost always going to be a hit. A Mario game is almost always going to be a hit. Pokemon is almost always going to be a hit. So there's free titles. If you're just into them free games, you're probably getting a lot of value for gaming in them free.
Yeah, they do well to get people in the door. I know I've got a bunch of work colleagues who bought a Nintendo Switch purely for Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
And these are people who, they used to play games as kids. They've never had a PlayStation, never had an Xbox. A lot of them, albeit a female as well. And I know a lot of women who've bought a Nintendo Switch just for Animal Crossing. And then by consequence, they've bought Mario Kart as well because they remember playing it with their cousin or their brother or sister as a kid. And then before you know it, they've bought one or two games, Mario Party drops, and it's such clever marketing, and it does really, really work for them.
Nintendo are great at the unique experiences, them sort of water cooler moments that people like. We talk about Animal Crossing round on the lunch breaks and stuff at work. That I think where Stadia's positioning is basically meant to be trying competing with in the same sort of realm as Xbox and Xbox and Sony. They don't get that as much, I don't think, outside of the Nintendo space.
Is it just because it's the new guy?
I think Stadia behind because of the new guy. That's one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
But they also haven't yet nailed that value proposition on why people should invest in Stadia over the other platforms, apart from just price point.
Yeah, very true. I'd be very intrigued to know if you went to a group of non-gamers to do like some marketing research and you took all the brands off everything. These people had no idea. If you said Nintendo Switch, they'd be like, oh, Nintendo are those guys who do Mario? Like they might have some recollection because again, as Mario and Nintendo go, they're very much integrated into
everyone's heard of Mario, everyone's heard of Nintendo.
100%. Whereas I think if you put the propositions on the table and give them both like generic brand names, like Tesco bargain value, and just went, this is a gamepad that costs £250. And this is what it does, this is what it runs on. And then on the flip side, they said, this one you can use your existing mobile phone, play these games instead, and the price entry point is nothing. You just buy the games you want to play. How people would feel on that. Unfortunately, that's not the real world, and that will never happen because brand power is everything when it comes to marketing. It's such a crazy problem. Like PlayStation Remote Play, we give PlayStation Remote Play shit because it runs poorly.
Yeah, that's why.
The libraries.
That's mainly that's the main reason why.
However, they've still got millions upon millions of subscribers, and that comes from its existing legacy. So the stuff Stadia needs to do. But as far as the supplemental thing goes, if you're out there playing FIFA, for example, on Xbox or PlayStation, and you want to play the best version of FIFA on the move on your phone, Stadia is your go-to place for it.
Absolutely.
Will be your go-to place.
It will be your go-to place, yeah. Whereas the Switch version, you're playing a 3-year-old version of the game, just reskinned for this year's rosters.
I think, again, it comes down to people's perception of what the Switch is. People are probably not buying a Switch to play FIFA. They might buy FIFA because they have a Switch.
Yeah.
It's
really weird. It goes back to what you said, Tom, about like why you play it for like the one game and such. And I have my Switch and I play Pokemon on it. I bought Zelda Breath of the Wild. Didn't really vibe with me. There's something about Nintendo games. I don't know. I've just outgrew them almost. But there's a lot of their first party titles that I look at, and similar to what we discussed in the podcast about Saints Row, where there's just something about it where I don't know whether it's the lack of dialogue. I'm so used to playing games now that have actual audio. The whole Animal Crossing, blah, 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 it doesn't do anything for me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm buying a £60 title. You could at least get a voice actor in to do the voice.
Well,
and there's something about that just doesn't appeal to me as much. It does it once or twice, little indie games maybe, but when I'm paying £60 for a big title, I just feel it loses some immersion for me because of that.
I'm with you to an extent, depending on the game, but something like Breath of the Wild, I don't want Link to have a voice. Link's meant to be a bit of a blank slate. I want the other characters in the world around Link to have a voice. But that comes down to me as an RPG fan. Sometimes I miss the days when RPGs where you would play as a silent protagonist rather than selecting from like 3 or 4 different voice lists. But the one I want to go on to is battery life.
Okay.
Now, one of the reasons why I hate mobile gaming is not necessarily to do anything with the games or anything to do with like microtransactions or anything. It's because phone battery life is pretty shoddy as is. You look for most phones over a year old, you get out a full day. Gaming on your phone will cripple it. And that's one of my issues with Stadia on my phone on the move. You're constantly thinking about when, because my phone's a utility device for me. It's not a gaming device. I like the fact I can game on it, but it's not why I'm not buying that device to game on. And that's one of the things I do always have liked about my Switch. This is a dedicated gaming device. So if we're going on holiday or something and I'm in an airport for a couple of hours, instead of hammering my battery life and wondering, okay, what time I'm going to get to the hotel, when can I charge my phone and all that sort of stuff, I've got this device where I can play as much as I want. If the battery dies, I put it away and it's fine. But I'd almost like to have
optimized for the purpose.
Yeah. I'd almost love to have Stadia on my Switch. That would be the best thing for me.
And I think that's what a lot of people like see Stadia as in, like you mentioned before, this whole idea of it being like a supplementary service rather than, a dedicated contender. Really, if you get, we've talked about this before. We've theorized like how Stadia would do if it was a service that featured on the likes of, you boot up your browser on your PlayStation, or you have an app on there for Stadia, or on Switch instead. Then it could be massively successful. But I just want to touch on that point again about like the battery life, because I think the way that Stadia works, because of the fact that it is streaming to your browser in essence, it isn't eating up as much as many resources. Yes, okay. I think the biggest impact on your mobile device that's going to drain the battery life is the use of the data transmission more than anything. The 4G, the 5G. Which sometimes you can reduce the battery consumption by switching to Wi-Fi instead, but then you're looking for a decent Wi-Fi connection that's going to be able to support the service. But again, like I just want to reiterate, like obviously one of the main focuses for Stadia as a service is to sort of have that accessibility and have the ability to being able to use it on devices where you normally wouldn't be able to game from, without the massive consumption or the massive need for extra battery packs and the likes as well. So I think we've got to be careful with talking about stuff like that because it could be construed the wrong way.
I don't think it's an issue with Stadia, so to speak. I think it's more an issue with phones in general, because even watching YouTube videos can hammer your battery life.
Like, just as a comparison, I've recently gotten into Genshin Impact, which I was very delayed in getting into.
I didn't think people actually played that. I thought it was just a marketing strategy.
Well, that's actually it's a pretty decent game, to be honest with you. I got into it recently, but as a mobile app, I booted that game up for the first time and there was a 9.7 gig download for the game. Like, you install the app and then you immediately open it and there's 9.7 gigs worth of data that you need to actually install on your mobile device. It is a fully fledged game on your phone. I boot that up and my phone battery, gets absolutely nerfed into existence. It just gets nuked.
Yeah.
But I could sit there on the other hand and I could play Stadia on my mobile device on the go for quite a long time and not have any issues.
You're not really stressing the GPU or the CPU too much.
It's not using the internal GPU. Well, to an extent it is, but only as far as the browser needs to render.
Yeah, it's rendering video. It's not.
Yeah, it's the same way.
It's no different than Netflix.
Yes, exactly. It's the same as Netflix. And I think where I'm trying to go with this is that the Switch is great for what it does, but again, like, the hardware is good, the use of it is good, the first party is excellent. But if you take away the first party and you look at what you get in comparison, like you said, Chris, to like go way back to one of the original points, is there's more games I could play on Stadia that are more like the AA, AAAs that I'm interested in. But Switch, for me, still has even though I'm going to hate saying this because I know a lot of people don't like this opinion, but Switch still beats it at indies because Switch has always had like good access to good indie titles.
Yeah.
And at the moment, Stadia is getting indie titles.
I think,
but are they of a good enough quality at the moment?
The indie titles, I think, are becoming a bit of a stick to beat Stadia with, though, because again, it comes down to where it's positioned in the market. People are crying out for Warzone. They're crying out for things like Battlefield or things like Control and like these AAA titles, and then they're getting indies where people
market.
Max market where people buy. Like, a lot of people bought their Switches for Mario, for Zelda, and then I have this, I'll try out these indies.
Yeah. Indies have always been like the lifeblood of any platform. Look how much PlayStation 4 launched and doubled down on like indie support and indie sales and offerings, and it was great, and you get fantastic titles out of it, and they're always going to be there. But you're totally right, Richie. If you give me pro games that are made up of like 3 or 4 indie titles every month, that's great. But if you were dropping in there a BioShock remaster, a Tomb Raider game, a Mass Effect game or something, like just any kind of AAA quality game in and amongst that, it feels much more valuable in terms of proposition. But if it's just indie game after indie game, you start to look at it and just think, you've got nothing in the tank other than a couple of smaller titles.
Keeping with a Nintendo reference, it runs the risk of potentially going the way of the Wii, where it started off really well, cool, exciting technology, but then just ended up with a load of shovelware.
The day we start to get mobile ports across the state, like every other mobile game that's in the Android Play Store starts showing up in the Google Stadia Store, is when it's like
it needs curate.
Oh no,
I think there is space for some mobile games on Stadia, like Genshin Impact, for example. Tom said it's a legit full game. So that's one that could probably work, but it needs curation. I do think that the mobile market for Stadia still feels untapped. I think I need to get into the consumer's head, and probably actually into the heads of a lot of games journalists as well. How well Stadia can play as a mobile device.
Yeah,
Because,
I think that's the biggest impact from COVID that's happened. That all these journalists would usually be traveling the world, going to Gamescom, going to all the E3s, all the PAX Westies. They'd be traveling around the States, left, right, and centre every other month.
Well, because
they've all been at home, they've got the console right there.
Yeah, they're comparing it directly against Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, which the libraries of them are, I think, objectively, they're better. They're better than Stadia. And the best you get usually out of games journalists are, it works, it's fine. There's no detectable latency, stuff of that nature. It just feels still a bit lacking. There's still work to be done.
Yeah. I genuinely think the big difference will be is when the journalists and the mass public are able to get back out and they are traveling around, they're in airports, they're in hotels, they're staying at families, they're away on work conferences, whatever like their normal life looks like, and they're able to sit in a hotel and play Cyberpunk or sit at a bus stop where they're waiting to go to college or something and play FIFA and play The Division or something.
Yeah.
That's when people go, you know what, this Stadia thing's quite good. It's like my Switch, but I don't need to carry my Switch around with me to play these games.
Especially if that's partnered up with day-and-date AAA titles. So imagine if you're a games journalist and you're going to a convention and then you get your code for that new game that you need to write up on. Mm-hmm. Do you want to lug a PlayStation 5 around with you, or are you happy to play and throw a Chromecast in your bag and plug into the hotel's TV?
Yeah,
I think you need to. Really interesting argument. Sorry, Chris, to interrupt you there, but I think it's a really interesting argument to actually say. I don't think I've ever considered the point that perhaps while Stadia, on the one hand, really sort of took. I don't want to use the term using an opportunity, like taking an opportunity with the whole COVID pandemic, but it was a good time to launch, really, for getting it out there. But I've never really heard the argument before about whether it was hindered from a journalistic perspective by that as well. I think that's a very interesting take, and it's one that might very well sway the masses.
Yeah, I think
later on down the line.
I definitely think it's probably a contributing factor, because you're not getting. It's almost like Stadia's usefulness has been diluted because people aren't traveling and people aren't playing on the go.
Is the biggest thing, isn't it? It's you don't need to lug around the console to play those games. And for someone who does travel for a living with work, and I did spend 2, maybe 3 days of the week in a hotel, and I was one of those hardcore gamers, Richie, who packaged away the PS4 into a special bag and took it with me and tried to hijack the HDMI port in a hotel. As Stadia launched in November 2019, I didn't have to do that. I have a decent 4G mobile plan and it works. And I was playing Tomb Raider in the hotel room.
We've both.
But if I'm a journalist, I've just been in my house for the last year and a bit.
I've known people who pretty much get up on the Monday morning, get a train to another part of the country, work for 5 days, and get the train home for the weekend. Stadia would be ideal for people like that. But I think Stadia does suffer from the bit of a botched launch as well, especially from in the journalist point of view. So there were people that are interested. I think journalists probably were talking very generic here, generalizing a lot here. Were probably interested but skeptical going in. Then there was problems at launch, and then went negative, and that's hard to break that back out of, especially when it's almost the platform's been hamstrung.
Yeah, first impressions are key, and obviously let's face it, the Wii U was a failure, and yet Nintendo still somehow managed to pull back some energy, launch the Switch, and the Switch obviously launched with Zelda Breath of the Wild. If it didn't launch with Breath of the Wild, I'd be very interested to know where its standing would be now if it didn't hit the ground running, because it would have been like, oh, is this just another Wii U? There's no good games. But no, it launched with a generation-defining title.
We could go into the Wii U all we want, but for me, they branded it terribly, so people didn't realise it's a completely different console to the Wii. And then the games were a little bit lackluster. There are some great titles on that platform.
Well, let's remember, Breath of the Wild is technically a Wii U game.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
In fact, they actually cut a lot of content, a lot of features, so it could work on both platforms. Because it was meant to be like gamepad features. If you think the Sheikah Slate as a concept would work well as a gamepad.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that potential existence of that world.
I like the concept of the gamepad, to be honest. But I'm a fan of my.
I don't want to be
3DS.
looking down from playing what I'm playing up there. Anything that breaks my immersion with the screen I'm looking at is a bad move in my opinion.
See,
Red Dead Redemption tried it with the map on your tablet.
Yeah.
It's a great premise. Like, I can have my map open to look at, and then every time you look down, you're taking your eyes off the ball.
But I mean, I was always a fan of my 3DS, so. Again, actually,
well, yeah, that's gone now as well, hasn't it? Like they folded their industry into one. So yes, it sold 40 million Nintendo Switches, but how much is that eaten into the DS sales and the home console sales? They've kind of just merged into one now.
Well, that's the thing. I was such a fan of my 3DS. I actually always saw my Switch as a replacement for the 3DS.
Wow.
I am the guy who plays most of my games on Switch in handheld mode.
So what's Stadia replaced, Richie?
Stadia hasn't replaced anything, actually, yet.
Ooh. Well, that's back to the core of the argument, is it doesn't need to replace anything because you don't need anything to play it. You just need a screen and some old kit lying around the house.
Anyway, any last thoughts?
I think the future could be bright. Again, ideal world, partnership. Imagine a world where Mario Kart and stuff comes to Stadia in some kind of Nintendo exclusivity.
Or you have a Stadia app on your Switch. So you get your Switch, you've got all the Nintendo first-party stuff, but then you want to play Cyberpunk, so you just boot up the Stadia app on it.
Oh, you know what I've just thought as well, which the current gen are getting like dragged through the weeds over? Storage. We always say this about Stadia. You said there, Richie, have a Stadia app on your Switch. That's great. But if that could have your Zelda titles and your big game titles like Doom Eternal, you don't have to go out and buy a memory card. You don't have to be restricted to the limited storage of the 32 gig Switch. You can just play those big titles in the cloud.
I don't know
through
how.
The app.
That's one thing we haven't touched on. Is like how on earth can a current gen console, because Switch still is, have 32 gigs of storage?
Yeah,
I know it is expandable, but it's expandable by SSD cards
and extra cost.
Yeah, an extra cost. When we talk about, I think the PS5's 500 gig storage is not adequate.
It's not 500. It's 800 and something.
The PS5.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's 800 something. So completely wrong. Still not adequate. Needs to be over a terabyte.
It's still not good enough when Call of Duty Warzone's like 1 million gigs or something, it feels like. But yeah, I think I forget about that all the time with Stadia, the convenience of, I have like 90 plus games in my library now, and I don't have to delete anything. I don't have to move anything around. I just click play on any title and I'm playing it within 20, 30 seconds. That cannot be beaten by any other platform, hands down. And portability can't beat portability. I'm fortunate enough to have unlimited data. I have a tablet, I have a phone, I have a PC, I have Chromecast sticks. I can play any room in my house or out in the street. I can play these games.
But the fact that
titles like Cyberpunk and Assassin's Creed, I can't do that on Switch or PlayStation or Xbox.
Having a tablet separate to your phone resolves my battery concern issues, because then you have a separate device to handle the gaming side.
Yeah, when I sometimes play, when I was doing the Avengers grind in bed on a night, I'd usually just prop the tablet up in front of me, Stadia controller, and just play on like a good 10.5 inch display screen, like AMOLED, Samsung, rich quality colors as well. Looks gorgeous. But again, I'm very much in a niche case basis. But there's lots to be said. I think 2021 is going to be an interesting year. But whatever these business partnerships that Stadia's new focus has switched towards are, could you imagine the windfall Stadia would get if they could partner with PlayStation or Nintendo? Because obviously Xbox aren't bothered. They've got their own Azure thing that's doing wonders for them, and it runs fantastic. Amazon are obviously doing their own thing, but I just think they need to get in the door with somebody. They need to partner with someone to give them that injection. And I honestly think the best one for both parties would be Nintendo for their IP and also helping Nintendo out with their shitty infrastructure.
There's more, again, I think, mutually for Nintendo Stadia Google partnership than the Google Sony or Google Microsoft partnership.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Wow.
Any last thoughts?
All good.
You, I think I've said mine.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to Switch and Stadia, baby.
And with that, that's all we have for you this week. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon for the lowly price of £1 a month, and you can get this show a whole 5 days early. Check out other shows such as the Sound Stadia podcast or First Night community streams. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Richie.
I've been Tom.
I've been Chris.
Thank you very much for watching. We've been Sound Stadia. It's completed.
It rain!